try to present the work we did on apps and smartphones. My name is Freyschuss. I'm from Sweden. This is my young colleague.
Good morning. My name is Flavio. I'm from Italy, and I'm honored to be here as representative of one of the EAPC young community.
So, our first task was to discuss the current use, the challenges and the limitations of the use of apps and smartphones. So we did a bit of an inventory of how these are used in our countries. And we came to the conclusion that we could divide this into two main areas. The one where we call it the situational, where you actually are doing it when taking care of patients. And then that's include scoring systems, calculators, risk calculators, communication between doctors, and accessing guidelines when you need them. And that's for continuous professional development and for training, of course. And the other one is more educational, where you actually are, you could be a student, or you could be a patient, or you could be a resident in training, or it could be for your continuous professional development. And then you would use other means that you would use maybe flashcards, quizzes, YouTube films of how to insert a temporary pacemaker, podcast, news feeds, and other things. And many apps are used for teaching of medical students, for example, of vocabulary collaboration and that sort of thing. Then we went on to the challenges, and then we thought that one challenge is how to assure that the apps are independent, that how are you sure that they're updated, that someone created them, but are they updated to today's knowledge? Another thing is, how should you use this when you're in a situational context, when you have the patient in a room? It could be a possibility or a limitation, or maybe you might have to think about how to actually use them in a way that you do it to enhance your interaction with the patients rather than a negative factor. And we might need standard SOPs, standardized operating procedures for how to do certain things. And we also were concerned about patient data security. When you use particular data from a patient, should it be owned in a database or in the patient's smartphone, or you know, how, and transfer of data? So that's something we have to think about carefully. And if we look forward to the limitations, language is a limitation. Today, not everyone has, like me, has English as their native language. And there's been a discussion for a long time in the EAPC about how to tackle the question of translating everything. And that's still an ongoing discussion. It doesn't become any less over this. And then there's another factor that's about the availability of smartphones, also about internet availability and speed, which could be a limitation. And then one very important thing is the trust on the quality content. Who is behind the app and the content, and how are we assured that it's updated? And that's something we have to really tackle. I'm going to leave the more concrete part to my colleague.
So moving from the present to the future, as well as from limitations to potential solutions or proposals, first of all, we believe that a strong interaction between national cardiac societies and the EAPC is needed, particularly for the translation in collaboration with the national cardiac societies that should be encouraged by the EAPC. And this is appropriate not just for contents dedicated to physicians, but also to contents potentially dedicated to patients. And we need to minimize the number of apps. This is the reason why we proposed to have just one app, one multitasking app that includes not just guidelines, but also scores and clinical cases, courses, webinars, and textbooks, we should open the app and read the clinical cases or textbooks, depending on what we are looking for. And another important point is to tag systematically all contents that should be easily searchable in the clinical practice and also during the clinical practice. And then to have tagged news with news flashes and new feeds based on scientific and EAC educational activities. Another important point is that when we use app, we usually use calculators, but also we open an app for the decision making on this, on a clinical case. And this is the reason why we believe that decision support flowcharts or algorithms are needed in an app in order to help physicians and to educate trainers in the clinical activities. And this is the final slide in order to summarize our idea, as we think that millennials have a completely different approach, not just to read a book, but also to learn and get informed. And this is the reason why we should go faster, and we should use audios and videos more than textbooks. And finally, our proposal is to have real case, collaborative cases in order to engage colleagues to a platform that is quite similar to social media, but is dedicated to a discussion and questions around the real clinical cases.
Great, thank you very much. That was a great summary of that. It's a difficult and evolving area, and it's been in our pockets most of the time. Do we have some questions?
Ronan Be'eri from Jerusalem, Israel. There is one real challenge in using applications at the bedside, is that many applications, many calculators are available online to download. Many of them are from recognized bodies and people that you can trust, but many of them are not. And when you use calculators like that, and this is a challenge for the ESC, for calculators that would be sponsored by the ESC, a small error in formula might gravely impact patient management. So you rely on calculating ejection fraction on an echo using a calculator app, but if there is a small error in the formula, whatever you do is wrong. And that's one challenge for the ESC as a body that would issue such calculators, to make sure that all formulae are validated and pass a quality control process.
This is Gamila Nasr, the Vice President of the Egyptian Society of Cardiology. I have another suggestion, the use of smartphone. In many countries, there are remote areas where you couldn't have health care system properly. So why not we can use it in a form of telemedicine? For example, if a doctor is used in a remote area, and then he needs consultation from another area, a tertiary hospital, and so on. So I think this can be a possible application. The next, I think, possible application, we all know that we have many patients all over the world, all over the countries, and they need rehabilitation. I think there is a place for smartphones for rehabilitation of the cardiac patient, especially. You can just be in relation with or in direct connection with his doctor, his hospital, and so this is just a suggestion.
Paulus Kirchhoff from Birmingham. A comment and a question. First of all, both in Europe, there is a CE certification system that is being developed for trustworthy smartphone applications that provide clinical decision system, and the FDA is developing a similar system. It comes back to our discussions earlier. This field is moving so fast that the regulators almost inevitably lag behind. And the question to you, maybe, do you think that the ESC and other international professional societies are trusted providers of such apps? Maybe the answer is obvious. And should the ESC continue to produce, develop, and publish apps as a trusted provider of those, or is that something that we should refrain from, as there are so many others? What are your thoughts?
We were actually talking about this in the group, and I think I perceive it as a consensus that people do trust the EAC apps. So it's a good brand mark in that respect. I would like just to comment on the former speaker, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity for prevention and rehabilitation to actually, communicate with your patient in that respect. That we haven't really talked about that, but it's a very good point. Thank you.